Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now a couple of weeks ago I bought this, a Ryzen 7 5700X3D. Since then, well, I accidentally dropped it and bent about a quarter of the pins. I used a straight edge to bend them back and posted on X, at RGInHD by the way, about how the CPU still worked, but it was causing my PC to run super slowly. I didn't intend to make a video about the subject because it's not really that exciting or helpful. I just wanted to move on. That said, it was only when I did move on and started working on my next video that I figured out what was causing the issues. Apart from the fact it lost a fight with gravity thanks to my clumsy sausage fingers. I only have footage after I bent the pins back. The last thing I thought of doing after dropping over £100 worth of processor was taking a picture. That said, I thought I'd done a decent enough job. The CPU was sitting flush in the motherboard socket and it booted up straight into the BIOS, but the first signs of lasting damage already started to appear. Navigating the BIOS felt a bit sluggish and unresponsive, and after I made the usual changes to RAM speed and boot order, things got even slower. At one point the PC restarted during the getting devices ready screen, which was already taking its time to say the least, and I was treated to a cycle of flashing motherboard status lights until the system eventually got into Windows. At this point I should mention, if you didn't notice from the BIOS footage, that I'm using a B550 motherboard. This will be relevant later. I've tested it with a few CPUs and found it to be working absolutely fine. Now my 4070 Super drivers were already installed, though according to GPU-Z the card was running in PCIe 2.0 mode even under load. This is a PCIe 4.0 card, so concerns were had. Especially as the moment building up to opening the program and others was an absolute lag fest. It felt as though my PC was getting slower and slower. I thought it was going to jam up completely at any moment. Interestingly, the CPU performance itself remained unaffected. The Cinebench R23 scores were still very similar to my initial testing. That was until I opened up DaVinci Resolve and the PC just black screened before restarting. Gaming was also a diabolical experience. At this point I thought it must be something to do with the PCIe lanes. I won't lie, I don't know too much about the technical side of what makes up a processor, but whatever pin or pins control or affect the PCIe lanes or graphics card must be damaged. I couldn't see any damage even through a magnifying glass, but there's got to be a crack or chip somewhere. Someone, or maybe a couple of people, said PCIe lanes when I uploaded this whole disastrous saga on X. Just to be sure, I did a clean uninstall of the Nvidia drivers and reinstalled them with a 4060 in the system instead, and again the same thing happened. The card was once again limited to PCIe 2.0 mode, but even so it should do way better than this. Interestingly, the period between driver installations when we were running off the basic Microsoft display adapter, the system was as smooth as you like, no issues to report. At this point I was ready to cut my losses and sell the CPU as completely faulty. Maybe someone more knowledgeable than I could get it working properly. In the meantime I purchased another motherboard, actually one of the cheapest B450 boards I could find. It came with a free CPU, so at some point it will make for a fun video, but during my testing I just got the urge to try it with the 5700X3D. I was pretty confident that the MSI B550 board that I had been testing was fine. I had used a few chips with it, but I had nothing to lose, so I slapped the 5700X3D into this basic board, which gets the job done on paper and even supports the most powerful 5000 series processors. But I wouldn't recommend it. I'll get onto that another time. It works with the 5700X3D here just fine, and I mean fine, apart from the fact it doesn't boost past its 3GHz stock speed, but this seems to be a board limitation this time around. Still, the chip that I dropped on the floor, bending 25% of the pins before pushing them back into place in a near panicked state, is all of a sudden working to a respectable standard. But why? Well, this B450 motherboard doesn't support PCIe Gen 4 for the graphics card, just 3. If we go into GPU-Z, you'll see my 4070 Super running in PCIe X16 3.0 mode instead of 4.0 mode like it would with a newer B550 board, for example. Weirdly, the card wouldn't default to Gen 3 mode in a newer board, it just limited itself to Gen 2 or PCIe 2.0, but here it's running in Gen 3 mode, which it'll also do if I set it to Gen 3 manually with the newer motherboard from within the BIOS. Because the cheap B450 board maxes eyes out, so to speak, at PCIe 3.0, I was able to notice it working fine in pairing with my card. Now, some damage has definitely been done somewhere, and even older PCIe generations like 2.0 or 1.1 wouldn't cause performance as bad as we've seen today, but for some reason, and as long as I am using a PCIe 3.0 graphics card, or I limit the PCIe slot to run in 3.0 manually, the sort of broken 5700X3D should work just fine. Strange. This was true when I switched to another newer B550 motherboard. In auto mode, the GPU will run in PCIe 4.0 mode and our frame rates, although not as horrific as before, are quite awful. The processor is actually boosting now as well because it's sitting atop a more capable board. I'm using a Wraith Stealth stock cooler, so it's not boosting as high as I've seen with an aftermarket one, but that's besides the point today. This also begs the question, how badly is gaming performance affected? Now, if we were using a more bandwidth limited GPU like a Radeon 6500 XT with its 4 PCIe lanes, then we may notice potentially significant performance loss in PCIe 3.0 mode. More powerful cards with 16 lanes like the 4070 Super shouldn't be impacted all that much, providing there aren't more underlying issues with this chip. There's an interesting Techpowerup article about PCIe scaling with a 4090 that showcases the difference, and it ends up being 2 or 3% overall, depending on the resolution. I'd like to think the difference would be even less with this card. I can't bring you any comparative results today because, well, I don't have another, albeit fully working 5700X3D, but it's nice to know there is sort of a workaround that won't impact our gaming frame rate too much. Of course, I still can't forgive myself for being an absolute clumsy sausage. Oh, sorry, no offence. I didn't intend to make a video detailing my personal clumsiness, but maybe it'll be helpful to someone someday who's troubleshooting a broken CPU. Maybe you just want to laugh at a so-called tech YouTuber breaking his PC accidentally. Not exactly sure what the issue is. Even though the CPU calls the GPU to run in PCIe 2.0 or 1.1 mode, it shouldn't perform as bad as it did today, and I have no idea why setting a PCIe 3.0 limit then allows the card to run in PCIe 3.0 and work smoothly. As I said, something has been damaged, but at least the 5700X3D isn't completely barren of all life, and I can still use it and enjoy it somewhat. Though whether or not I'll keep it is a different story. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening to my story of clumsiness today, and hopefully I'll see you all next time.